Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Can UFO sightings, ghosts, and other paranormal phenomena be truly understood if we isolate them from one another? Can entire regions be haunted? Is it the places that are haunted, or the people?
Oh, crap. Wrong side. I'm very sorry. Welcome to Behind the Paranormal. And half of my script is missing.
I'm sorry. Well,
so pass me that, please.
All right.
And I can continue.
What am I supposed to do?
So hello there, and welcome to the 353rd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And those questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. So, on our show tonight, we continue to look at the Rendlesham UFO case of 1980 and related subjects from the viewpoint of military eyewitnesses who have not yet been prominent in previous media reports on the subject. We also have two guest hosts this evening, but before we introduce anybody, it's time for our weekly paranormal contest. So last week's question was, what site has been called Russia's Area 51?
Well, Lindsay Kress of Franklin, Massachusetts got the right answer. Kapustin Yar in southwestern Russia near Volgograd. Long been a test site, it has been long been a test site, I should say, for bizarre aircraft and is rumored to have alien craft and bodies that fell into the hands of the Soviets a number of years ago. Much the same as in Area 51 in Nevada.
All right, so this week's question is, what town in New England was the center of the witchcraft hysteria from 1647 to 1663? So be first to get that right and win a copy of the newest edition of Footsteps in the Attic, my dad's most popular book.
I will tell you that is a trick question, so I'll leave it at that. We do welcome callers this evening. I usually get yakking in the conversation, forget to give the phone numbers, but here they are. Our numbers locally or from Canada, 401-766-1240, or from anywhere in the USA, 800-449-1240. Let's start with introductions. First, our guest. We do have our guest, Mr. Producer.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Major Laurie Rehfeldt, U.S. Air Force retired, was stationed at RAF Bentwaters, RAF Woodbridge during the eventful Christmas week in 1980, when numerous military witnesses, including high-ranking officers, witnessed multiple UFO sightings, landings, and possible interaction between the craft and military personnel. Her own experience, however, happened quite a bit before that, and we'll be talking about that a number of months before the incident that gets all the credit. For our previous coverage of the Rendlesham incident, probably the best documented and most historically significant UFO encounter in history, listen to the free podcasts of our 16-hour series on that case, which aired on CBS Radio and Achieve Radio in 2010. Major Rehfeldt retired from the Air Force. You can find those, by the way, at BehindTheParanormal.com. Again, they're free podcasts. Major Rehfeldt retired from the Air Force after a long and distinguished career. You can hear our previous interview with her on the CBS Radio edition of this show on the 2012 podcast page at BehindTheParanormal.com. It's show number 346 under the CBS logo.
So, Laurie Rehfeldt, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me some more time to talk a little bit more in depth about what I saw and what happened.
Well, anything this case has, its depth, we'll tell you that. In 30 hours, and we're still trying to get to the bottom of what happened. Anyway, in studio, Laura, if you'll just excuse us for a moment, we'll introduce our in studio guests and co-hosts this evening. Thom Reed, who has been a guest on the show several times, and his son Chris Reed. The Reeds are at the center of what is considered the best documented alien abduction case of an entire family, so much so that the case has been discussed at the United Nations. Happened mostly in Massachusetts and Connecticut, not far from where we sit, and not far from where I lived at the time. You can learn about their case on the 2012 podcast page, show number 322. And, Thom, why don't you give us your website as well?
It's www.thomreed.info.
Okay, very happy to have you. Did you get to Newport today at all? As you were coming into Rhode Island?
I swung in there for a couple of minutes.
I should have warned you about the traffic.
Yeah, it was the bridge was backed up seriously.
Yeah,
so
brand new bridge, twice the size, and it's still backed.
And
anyway,
$8 to get across.
Yeah.
We hate that toll.
Yeah,
we're working on that.
Yeah,
it's rough on
it was
tourists.
nice anyway.
Well, you could go around this really roundabout way from Fall River where you don't have to pay any toll.
Only Rhode Islanders know about that.
Yeah, no. Well, now the secret's out.
Now I do.
Okay, there you go. Well, anyway, given their own experience, the Reeds probably will have some questions for Lori as well.
Sure.
All right, so Lori, now let's move on to some questions here after the fun little introduction.
Sure.
So we're dealing with two NATO Air Force bases in Suffolk, England, with the notoriously haunted Rendlesham Forest between them. And the sightings and landings that get all the publicity happened in December 1980, but your main sighting happened 10 months before that. Can you tell us about that experience?
Well, it happened in February 1980, and it was a midnight shift. I was on D flight, Delta flight, and I was the lead patrol with Airman First Class Keith Duffield. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, which is interesting because it correlates with similar to the time when the others saw theirs. And what happened was it looked like a C-130. It looked like just a bright light, but it was coming in as an approach to the RAF Woodbridge runway, coming from the North Sea, it was heading from east to west. And we were sitting right out by East Gate, and we were pointed in the direction of east of us. So we were pointing in the direction of the North Sea. And well, this plane was coming in, and so we thought, and I kept looking over at the runway to see if lights would go on, and waiting for these blue lights to go on. It's really pretty. And then what happened, it was about a football field away, and this is where it got really strange. The lights didn't come on, and we looked out, and the aircraft stopped in midair. And it was there for probably about 30 seconds. And then we were just couldn't believe it. Then it went up, down, left, right, made these geometric movements. Almost like the sign of the cross, which was kind of interesting. I never thought of it until many years later. And then at that point, it broke into 3 smaller pieces or lights, and that they flew over the runway past us, and then they went straight up. They went straight up into the night sky, and we lost sight of them at that point. So I had to call it in because it did fly over the runway, and we were told to report. The desk sergeant, Sergeant Cohen, told us to go and report it to the air tower. And back then, there wasn't much for technology, so we went over to the air tower, climbed the metal steps, and knocked on the door, woke the airman up that was in there, and he tried to tell us it was probably afterburners from a British airplane, and we pretty much said that to the desk sergeant, and it was just kind of no credibility. Here I'm an airman, and we're just.
Yeah, you were not yet an officer, right?
Right.
Not that doesn't mean you wouldn't have been ridiculed.
Yeah. Well, there was also the problem of being railroaded out of the military. They had issues with for the security guys, the PRP. It was to the point that I really wanted to stay under the wire as much as possible, but we were both curious of what we saw, and I got really excited in the 1990s when I learned about Left at East Gate. I mean, it just threw me because I didn't hear anything about the Freedom of Information Act, and I never pursued any of it because I was not really a UFO kind of person. It just wasn't what I did. But I did see it, and I really thought it would corroborate what they saw, what the others had seen in December. And I have my speculation of why they're there. Mainly, it was a nuclear base.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just ask you this? the hesitancy on the part of witnesses is renowned. Are you aware of people who just never reported things that occurred, such as you experienced or such as was experienced in the following December, and just people just don't know about it?
Well, when I to put it this way, a good example is when I sat there after we saw the UFO fly over, the three pieces fly past us and fly up into the night sky. I handed my radio over to Keith because I thought, hey, if anyone's going to have to report it, let it be him, because he, at least he's a man, he'll have more credibility than me. And he handed it over to me saying, no. I mean, it was just like that movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind where, do you want to report it? No. Do you want to report it?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there is, yeah. I mean, I talked with my friend Ken Kern, and he'd seen the UFO sighting, and he did not report it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a whole lot more, I believe, UFO activity happening then and happening now.
Well, that's why we keep covering this case, to ad nauseum to some people, but I mean to most people, they realize that this is the tip of the iceberg. Tom or Chris, did you have any questions at this point?
Not right now. I'm just getting a feel for what took place.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay,
maybe perhaps if there was any environmental changes or anything you felt in the air, or was there any type of a vibe or magnetic energy you felt, or anything?
Yeah, a lot of people talk about the electrical tingle,
right,
that sort of thing.
No, we didn't have that. And I don't know if it was because when it was roughly about half a football field, 50 yards away. We didn't get that close to it because again it flew over the runway, but so there wasn't anything like that. However, the base did have it was like a warped environment in regard to feeling like Alice in Wonderland, in the sense of everything was just kind of off kilter, and I do believe that whatever happened there over at Woodbridge and Bentwaters, if it was, say, someone was playing around with radar jamming, messing around with Einstein's theory of relativity or whatever, it opened something up, and it was a negative energy.
Yeah.
The place had a negative energy, and it really affected people in their personalities and their psyche, and because like I said, I'd been at other military bases, and I had never after that experienced what I experienced over there. It was like being in a combat zone, where you had to be careful, or you would lose your livelihood. You'd be humiliated. You'd be treated like what we call snap. Snap.
Well, we're going to get into that, but now Chris had a question.
Yeah. Even though you had some distance between you and the craft, could you give me an idea of how big the actual craft was before it split into three other crafts?
Like I said, it was probably about the size of a big, like a big airline. You got what are the airplanes you get into, and there are like 3 rows on each side. I mean, it was. I call it a cargo plane. It was a good size, but it wasn't astronomically big, but it wasn't tiny either, like a fighter aircraft. But when it broke into 3 pieces, it was pretty much small, just like I guess a fighter aircraft.
Was it pacing your plane at all at the beginning, or was it going like beside you guys or aimed towards you, or?
Yeah, they were going toward us. They were, but I would be. If it was a tennis court, I was looking to my right as it was coming up to us, and then looking to my left and watching it go up in the air. But it was heading in our direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you guys had radar on the base, I'm assuming. So did radar pick anything up of this craft, or? No,
and I don't, and that I'm not sure about it, if they had any technology there that they could have recorded it. Like I said, I went to the air tower and talked to the air tower control airman that was there, and he didn't know. He was just guessing, and I knew right off that he didn't see anything because he was sleeping.
Well, let's put some perspective on this from our point of view, because one of the things we always try and do is to look at the big picture. Western thought makes that difficult because we're taught to divide things up, pigeonhole, categorize, and we don't put things together. And if you take them apart rather than put them together, you can't see the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
That seems logical. So our particular point of view, from especially my 42 years of looking at things in the paranormal and being in the trenches, is that Rendlesham is one of many, many places. Really, the entire planet is like this, but places like Rendlesham especially so, something the Native Americans call a thin place, where a number of worlds, parallel worlds, some of which are very different from one another, may blend, connect like bubbles in a tub or something, and overflow one another, interact, and anything can happen, and anything can come through. Hence, when you have an area like this, you get UFOs of all different kinds, aliens of all kinds, ghosts, Bigfoot, unaccountable creatures, cars. We got an email today from somebody. Their car keeps turning around in the driveway without anybody in it. And they'll look out the window 1 minute, it's facing in one direction, and the next, This is entirely normal. There's nothing strange about the paranormal. So our point of view here, too, is that, and tying into something Graham Hancock wrote in his book Supernatural. I want to have him on. He hasn't been on for a while, but he's a terrific guest. His idea is quite interesting. That it's not necessarily, it is the area, but certain people, everybody has a brain that's more or less like a radio. When you are tuned to the right frequency, you can be standing there and see a UFO that's actually there, and someone might be standing next to you and not see it. Or in your case, the two of you might have seen it on the runway there, but the radar didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the analogies I use is if you're using say Photoshop or some photographic software, and you have all these photos on your computer, and you call them up, and it's only looking for one format, say TIFF
mm-hmm.
files. Those are the only ones that are going to show up on the screen. The JPEGs and all the other kind, you're not going to see them, but they're still there. That's the kind of idea. So just to give it a little perspective, at least that's the way we see it anyway. That's how we experience the paranormal. Okay, Ben, you want to? What are we going to? The whole intelligence question.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So usually from some of the other witnesses that we've talked to, they say that they were debriefed by certain intelligence officers and things like that. Were you told to keep quiet, or to keep quiet, not kept quiet, or were you ever debriefed, or any sort of thing like that?
No. We were neither one of us was debriefed. I mean, for a couple of weeks, I took a lot of heat for Rehfeldt seeing UFOs and all this other stuff. So, that was just enough to keep me quiet. But no, there wasn't really any credibility there at the time, because it wasn't as if a non-commissioned officer or an officer had seen it. It was two airmen first class personnel who had seen it. One of the things that I'd like to add to what Paul was just talking about is that I've had experiences throughout my life as a kid.
Yeah, that's what we were going to ask you next.
I was going to say
you are psychic.
I'm sorry?
So that's exactly what I was going to ask next.
Okay. Is that I mentioned earlier, the last show, is that I said that I'm psychic. And I wanted to clarify that because I believe that we all have the ability to be psychic. It's just a matter of what aptitude levels we're at. And I think some of us are magnets to what seems to be unusual, or we can clearly feel the presence of something that most people can't see. And I know I do have that ability. I think the ability's gotten stronger since after I'd been there over in England, and I can feel the presence, whether it's a ghost in a house or a sibling that passed away. I can describe them without knowing them.
Now, could I ask you? Sorry to interrupt, but could I ask you what other stimuli, so to speak, you picked up in the Rendlesham area? This is one of the things we're going to be doing over there, is having a town hall meeting and having people compare their experiences. So,
if you get a chance to go over to the back gate, East Gate, and I know you'll see the they put the gate shack in the middle of the road. The gate shack used to be, when we were there, it would have been to the left side of the road,
Right.
On the side. And right behind that it's just a cement paved area. It's nothing to really write home about. But at that point, when I was sitting in the gate shack looking out at the runway from that location, I could actually feel a gray behind me. I could feel it. I could describe it. I knew it was there, and I knew it knew that I was there, and it knew that I was too afraid to look. And then there was the other time when I did see Colonel Thompson, who had passed away in an air show in, I think it was July, something like that, 1979. And that was just a interesting story, because I thought he was a full bird colonel who didn't have his hat on, and I was going to have to tell him to put his hat on because he was a colonel, and if I didn't tell him to put his hat on, I would have been in trouble, because you have to wear your hat when you're outside. Yeah. And then he was gone. And then I described him, and one day I was in touch, his daughter got in touch with me, and she said that I described him exactly.
Okay, what about the notion that other witnesses have suggested the underground base at Woodbridge, the things of that kind, ideas of things going on that were behind the scenes and rather sinister, even the presence of grays on the base. Did that ring a bell anywhere with your experiences?
No, I wasn't really familiar with any place, that was underground. I would have been really, really curious. I know that there was a lot of places over there that were pretty scary. I know when the church at Woodbridge was on fire, I know that was a real creepy place, and no one knows what happened. And the Woodbridge non-munition storage area, the back side of it was really, there was something foreboding there that I just wouldn't go back there. I would do my building checks, but when it got to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever was there pretty much told me, you stay in that gate shack. And But it was just a feeling. But it was just incredibly. It was very scary.
Well, you learn to pay attention to your feelings. In December of '80, were you on the base when all this stuff went down the week after Christmas? The landings and all.
And this is interesting, and you can kind of put this together how you want to see it. When I got my orders finally to leave to PCS from Bentwaters to Woodbridge. I'd been counting my days down because I was just like everybody. I was just bitter. So I got my orders, and it was almost like a joke. I got orders to leave there on December 27th.
Really?
And I'm like, okay, all my stuff is packed. I'm going to be sitting in a dormitory room, and I'm going to miss Christmas with my family. And I got really, really mad that they thought it was funny, and I didn't really think it was funny. So I decided to make my own port call, and I flew out of Heathrow on and about December 15th. And I kind of wonder that some of the activity that happened during that time, I kind of wonder, if it knew that I was supposed to be there, but I wasn't there. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of, but I do think that whatever happened then was, and I'm not saying it was me, but whatever was happening there was very upset.
You get the feeling that other people or something else is pulling the strings. You fellas ever get that feeling from time to time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we certainly do.
You mean like mind control?
Well, maybe not. It's just somebody who sort of knows what's going on, and then
you're just in the mix.
Yeah, is in the mix, and somehow orders come through at odd times and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Since then,
I actually never thought of it, but when you put it that way, I was just so bitter. And when I got to my next base, I looked like I talked to people, and they said, "You look like you just came out of hell." And I was like, "You don't want to even hear."
A lot of witnesses have said that it was just a place that just drew energy out of you.
Yeah, it did to a point. I mean, in my case, and if you see pictures of me, I'm not anywhere near. I'm pretty thin, and I've been thin most of my life except for that time where I was there, and my body really physiologically changed to the point that my mom came to visit, and she walked right by me at the airport. I'm like, Mom, it's me, and she was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I put on weight in the service too, or maybe it must be the food. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that could be, but I it was just kind of, when I left there, everything went back to the way it should be. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
And my mother had this fight or flight urge to get me out of there. She's like, I got to get you out of here, and I'm like, I can't. I signed a contract. It's not like I joined a record club and you could save me. So.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a commercial break right now.
Okay.
We'll be right back. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with our guest and our guest hosts. Stay with us.
Curious about what's ahead for you in 2012? Guess. Or you can get a personalized astrological chart, setting you in the right direction, helping you to make those important decisions and choices. Fulfill your ambitions and achieve your goals. Move forward with confidence into the future this year, learning how to handle the new long-term planetary trends influencing your daily life. Money, health, job, your relationships, all included. Call me at 401-333-4048 for information on getting your chart or having a yearly update on a chart I've previously done for you. Put the spotlight on the future. Be a winner, not a worrier. Contrary to rumors you've been hearing about the world coming to an end in 2012, if it should, I'll give you a full refund. That's how sure I am it's not going to happen. I'm also available for private parties and speaking engagements. Call me 333-4048.
Okay, we wanted to remind you about Amazon.com and the marvelous readers you can get from them. And, of course, the most popular one at the moment, Kindle Fire, Amazon Kindle Fire, $199. You can get well over 2 million books, newspapers, movies, apps, games, anything you want for entertainment or for enlightenment, you can get on your app. I should say your Kindle Fire. And the Kindle device itself, you can get as low as $79 for the basic reader for books and magazines and newspapers. Check it out. You can get 4 of my books, Footsteps in the Attic, Faces at the Window. Certainly for those of you who are listening in the local area, Rhode Island, A Genial History, used in a couple of our school districts, and, of course, the most recent, Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. And you don't have usually I hit the guess at everybody for what books they have on Amazon Kindle because the sponsor likes it. But
I haven't got that yet.
Anyway, but check it out. Just about anything you want is on there, and it's a great gift for Father's Day coming up. Hint, hint, Ben. And yes,
I'll get you one for
yes.
Father's Day.
And you can get them at Staples or a number of other places. You can get them as well. Amazon Kindle Fire or the Amazon Kindle devices of other models. They're all great things. Check them out. Amazon.com on the net or Staples, which is not on the net, or on the net too, whatever.
I would like a new car.
Yes, okay. Well,
Are they on Amazon?
Oh,
yeah, Amazon too, right, exactly. So there we are. So, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal, and we have 2 guest hosts this evening, Thom and Chris Reed, who have been on the show as guests before, at least Thom has. The people who have been involved in probably the best documented family abduction ever recorded. And our official guest, Lori Rehfeldt, Major Lori Rehfeldt, retired U.S. Air Force, who was present at a number of very interesting occurrences at the Rendlesham Forest area, or the area of a number of very interesting cases that we have discussed on the show before. And so why don't we continue, of course, with our discussion with Lori. Now, Lori, in the years since 1980 and that particular experience, and in the years since you left the base, have you found your own particular sensibilities increased or changed, or have you had other UFO experiences or paranormal experiences where you changed in that way?
Yeah, I would say so. More so with the, feeling the presence of people that have died. Mostly, and feeling the presence of angels surrounding by a bed where someone is about ready to die, or I should say PCS to the next world.
One of the things, and you might want to think about this, just in the context of what we're asking here, we often find that we interpret what we're feeling in terms of the context. In other words, if you see a glowing being next to your bed, aha, and you're not afraid, must be an angel or a guardian or something. But if you see a glowing being underneath a disc that's hanging over your house, aha, it's an alien. What say you on that? I mean, what were these things that you feel you were seeing? Were they? And you're not going to, and you're not going to fright. I mean, you're not going to surprise or shock us, because believe me, Ben and I have been around in the multiverse too. We've seen all kinds of interesting things. So.
Yeah, I know that, and that's what makes me comfortable to be able to talk about it. In the military, no, I would never talk about any of this. Believe me, or I would have been,
Yeah, neither would I.
I would have been out, but now I could go into a room, and again, it doesn't happen all the time, but I can go into a room. I met this woman, and I went into the room, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that I wasn't supposed to be there to sell her insurance. But what I was supposed to be doing was really just sitting there. I mean, the room was just completely, I could feel the warmth, the love. And then in my mind, I could see these 4 really tall, muscular angels by the foot of her bed. And I told her, I said, you're going to think, I don't know what you're going to think, but I got to tell you this. You do realize that there are 4 tall angels looking over you. And she said, yeah, she knew it. And we talked and we held hands, and I kissed her on the top of the head and left. And a few weeks later went back and noticed that whatever was in that room was now gone. Mm-hmm. But that's just an example. And again, It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, I do feel a need to explain to people.
See, I relate to that personally, because as we discussed off the air on the phone, I was a seminary student for many years, and when I was working in particularly 2 psychiatric hospitals, one in Connecticut and one in New York State, people would be very often elderly, and there were a lot more inpatients than today, and they would be dying, and I would be present with maybe a priest or a doctor and some nurses, and all sorts of very, very interesting things would happen that over which the person could not possibly have had any physical control, or the presence was very common. I remember walking into a room one time, and whether I was imagining it, I don't know. I'm not that sort of person, but there was a misty thing hanging over this old man's bed, and I could just see a hand withdrawing into this mist just for a second or two, and it looked as though they had been holding hands or something. And I just, I didn't mention it to the priest I was working with. I didn't mention it anyway. I didn't dare. I think I was crazy. But so I hear you when you say that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, the thing is that, and I do believe that really needs to be respected, because it comes under the line, that comes under the word faith also. And I we can't, design or construct what we believe. So I just kind of think that we're heading to another level. I think that people are heading to being more their intuitive side, whether it's considered your feminine side or masculine side or whatnot. That people are getting to the point that I'm sure there'll be a lot of things going on with ESP and different kinds of things like that. But I think that it is real, and it's something that we need to, pay attention to. And this includes dreams. For instance, like I keep having a recurring dream, and Bentwaters and Woodbridge is always there. I call it my traveling dream. And I end up first I'm in Bentwaters and near East Gate, and the next thing I know, I'm in the desert, and I find myself in a place that I learned about it through a free copy of National Geographic, the Zone of Silence, a place that doesn't get any frequencies. Now, I'm not a scientist or a person very interested in frequencies or the Cobra Mist. I mean, I would have been a person sitting in the back of the room writing my memoirs or something while they were talking all the science stuff. But in this case, it's there and it's presented itself. And It's like, I got this information, I'm getting bits and pieces of messages. What do you do with it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, well, sometimes we find, especially when we talk to other people who are having similar experiences, that somehow when you put your heads together with other people and you have shows like this and you work together and you exchange information, it all starts to kind of come together like a puzzle.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the main reasons why I really think that the sighting in February is so important, because, first of all, it happened, not only that it happened before the main one, but the point is that it's happened before, and that when you start thinking in terms of what you had mentioned, an iceberg, there's so much more to really understand and learn about out there that
you need to put happening at Rendlesham since the Middle Ages. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's exactly. There was a mental hospital or a mental facility, I guess it was pre-Betty Ford in the 1920s, out by Tunstall Gate. And that was one area where there was like a creepy swamp over there, and I always felt something deathly over there. I mean, and it turned out that, well, let's see, some people got killed over there. Well, maybe their ghosts are still there. And
well, in our opinion, it's the actual people. And it goes, Ben, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, that's sort of what you were just saying, sort of leads into a question for us all, which is, where is this all going?
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe it's putting together the puzzle, as we were saying. I did want to ask Lori one kind of practical question at this point. When you had your sighting on the runway there, the description of the craft, did it in any way match what you later heard about the guys experiencing in the woods in December? Was it the triangular and all that?
Well, the lights when they were smaller kind of reminded me when they were talking about the lights darting in and out of by the trees.
Yeah.
That I was thinking was more like when it broke into the three pieces. And I do believe that, if I'm not mistaken, I think there were three small craft that they would see.
That brings up a question from Isaac in London, who writes, and I don't know if he's quoting from someone else, but he posted it, and we asked him if we could ask this question or just put it out for consideration. Why is the Rendlesham case so littered with errors? Why can't people get their facts right? Unquote. I would venture one answer, if this multiverse idea of ours is correct, different people can be having different experiences in the same place at the same time, and they could all be entirely legitimate. That's what's always struck me about the main Rendlesham affair of December, was that people are saying, "Oh, well, you're lying. That didn't happen." But maybe not. Maybe Larry Warren and Jim Pennison and John Burroughs it happened exactly as they said they did. But perhaps, even in the same place at the same time, when you're dealing with these overlapping worlds, anything can and does happen because all possibilities exist out there. So,
yeah.
What say you? I mean, is this the right question? Are there errors? Fact straight? What? Maybe it's not a legitimate question.
Yeah. I truly think that what the others experienced, they experienced it. And interestingly, you'd have to also look at the fact of the politics over there with under the command of Major Ziegler.
With the presence or non-presence of nuclear weapons?
Well, not only that, but what he could do to your career. I mean,
right? Oh yeah, a lot of politics in the officer corps.
And the thing is that he, when Larry Warren, he'd only been there for about 4 months, maybe, and he didn't. I don't think he knew the politics really, and I do believe that what he saw was a lot clearer and a lot more coming from somebody of, you could say, not tainted. So I mean, that's where I give him a lot of I believe what he said and what he saw, and then calling up his mom, and then next thing you know, he's being brought into the office. I mean, it was really very.
Yeah, I've read his book, Left in the Skate. Very interesting book.
And I can even visualize the phone booth he used, but where with John Burroughs, I knew him for a few years. I'd been there a year before John got there. I didn't know him well, but I knew that he was somebody who he had okay credibility.
Yeah. Well, I just not to interrupt, but we're kind of running out of time. I wanted to just comment that witnesses being at each other's throats like they sometimes are. I don't know if maybe it's not that extreme, but
that's a
classic black op.
That's a good example, though. I look at that as another piece of the puzzle. That is a good example of what it was like over there. That's exact. It was all cutthroat. It was all really people being mean to each other. People. I mean, people just treating each other.
Very negative atmosphere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
well, Thom and Chris had a question here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of circle back to what my first question was, and I'm not 100% sure why I asked you this in the first place, but I felt somewhat compelled. And you kind of clarified some of that with the fact that you said you've expressed some sensitive abilities, and if you will, for perhaps lack of a better word. But with that said, when you first saw the craft and it split, I had asked you if you had sensed anything or felt a different vibe in the air, or had gotten any feeling at all. And I think you said that you hadn't sensed anything different. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about it, I would say I was definitely in shock. I mean, I was kind of like, what the heck was that? I mean,
right.
It was almost like I wanted it to come back so I can analyze it again. But I do think that it fit in really well with the atmosphere, the negative energy,
negative feeling,
and you got to understand again. In
was it negative or was it more of a spooky?
It was just downright. It was downright negative. I mean, it was as if there was a tear in the dimensions, say that there's a war going on. There's a bad war going on, and that happens to be one of the hotbed places of whatever's going on there.
That's an interesting way to put it.
I really and I think it knows that there's a handful of us out there that felt it. And
I asked you that because when we had our experience, what happened around us, it became very...
I wanted to ask you to tell us about your experience. Maybe Lori has some questions for you.
We were in a car, and I was handing my younger brother a fireball, one of those 1-cent fireballs, and my grandmother had turned around to tell me not to give him this fireball, and when she did, she saw these lights out the back of our station wagon. And to wrap this up kind of quickly, what happened with us is actually the vehicle itself was affected, and it just kind of coasted off the right side of the road, and we would hear the stones, and we realized how dead silent and still everything had become. It was almost like a barometric change in pressure, like being in the middle of a hurricane. It was just still and dead. Everything around us was just dead. And you mentioned the spooky and so on, so this is kind of where I was going with this, but then suddenly there was just this wham, this eruption of crickets and katydids, and everything just got louder than life, and then that was our moment. Before I get into too much detail, but anyway, I was just curious because that's something that
a friend of mine had. This was several years ago. Katie Matthews, who worked for the 67th ARRS, they were the helicopter rescue squad over on Woodbridge. And one day he had asked me, Lori, did you ever fall asleep out there? And I thought, oh no, I'd never fall asleep out there. And then I started thinking to myself, well, maybe I might have dozed a little bit. And you know, that whole abduction thing, I've always been really curious about that. If I had or had not, I've never gone under any kind of hypnosis or anything like that. But that was
Thom was abducted since childhood. He and his brother. That was the beginning of their case.
60s, 1966, 67, 69.
Can we show some of these pictures for those who anybody who's listening?
My son actually had one question too. Do you mind?
Sure, no, by all means.
One of the other questions he had. Oh, you want to take it? Go ahead. All right.
You can go ahead.
One of the things that my son has a similar type of thing to what you're touching on, but he has been absolutely fascinated or intrigued with certain mathematical formulas and numbers and that sort of thing, and he kind of wanted to know if since this event, if you've been was it more of a fascinated by a certain shape or symbol, or
if there was anything that
Yes. It's the triangle with a small circle on the outside of the triangle and a circle that cuts into the triangle on one side. There's some pictures on my Lone Ranger group Facebook page.
Yeah, UFOranger.com, right?
Yeah. And and the other thing, when you talk about mathematical symbols, and this is going to sound, well, it all sounds kind of bizarre. Whenever I see birds flying, I see patterns, and these patterns, I see these lengthy equations. I don't know what that means, but I do all the time. And
I envy you. I wish I was better in math.
No, I know. I wish I was too, but I see, it's probably an algebra equation.
Now, because everybody's familiar with the whole binary code thing when it comes to Rendlesham, Jim Peniston, one of the big witnesses on the night of, I think it was the 27th, I don't know, felt that he went up and touched one of the landed craft, and felt that it was a binary code was downloaded to him, which years later, because it didn't mean anything to him then, he thought, well, maybe I ought to look into this, wrote it all down, and two experts, including Gary Osborne, who's been on the show and will be again soon, interpreted them as at least among other things, as Earth coordinates. And there were symbols on the craft as well, as you'd have on roundels on any military aircraft. And I don't know offhand if that triangle shape was one of those.
Well, he sees shapes and
I think it was, but I don't know. I'd have to revisit it, but there are some similarities. I had asked Gary Osborne about about the zone of silence, if there was any connection there with that binary, because.
Well, again, the idea of being, everything you've said, is starting to come together in the puzzle we talked about, and what it means, who knows. Different people in different places seeing similar things, pieces of the puzzle perhaps coming together. I hate to use the term warfare going on behind the scenes somewhere or somewhen, but that rings true with what we see in the paranormal in our own work, which very often has very little to do with UFOs, although it's getting more so.
Yeah,
we're just getting drawn into it.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, the power of goodness and the power of evil,
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and you can really
sound.
torque off evil with a little goodness.
Kindness. I think in the end, well, as I've always said, regardless of what 2012 means, if anything, and everybody's talking about the changes or the end of the world or a Mayan stuff, whatever is happening, as I've said it 100 times, I'll say it 100 more, I want to be found doing what I'm supposed to be doing my work in an honest manner, loving and taking care of my family, loving God as best I can in my own way. This is the way. This is the way you do it. What's called life.
Right. Well, I was watching the History Channel the other day, and there was this thing about Ephesians, and interestingly, two scientists had drawn a similar aircraft, and it kind of looked like the one that Peniston had seen. It had the legs on it that had the round discs at the base of it. But the other interesting thing about that picture is I saw my gray, the one, I should call him my friend, but the gray that was behind me at Eastgate, he was on that picture. and I was just kind of. I'm trying to find that. I'm trying to find that picture now.
Well, in the meantime, why don't we show, for anybody who's listening on a computer, we have some things some illustrations that Thom and Chris brought with themselves today. Now, what is the significance of the term Willow Lake? That's where...
Well, Willow Lake is actually a combination of the lake that took place, my mother was on in 1954, that fourth week of June. But the sketch here that you're seeing, I actually drew when I was 9, 10 years old, and it hung in my fourth grade classroom, and it now hangs in Roswell. Mm-hmm. And so I had some...
the museum in Roswell.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So I had a couple copies made, and I just basically brought those for you. And
I appreciate that.
At the same time, it's very significant. And what's most significant about that, more than anything, is the willow tree. Mm-hmm. Our entire family has had this connection to... I'm not sure why, if it's just kind of a symbolic type of thing. It's just the willow tree has just been kind of followed our family for some reason. We find a connection to it. It's every time we drive by one, it triggers a memory. My brother has one hanging in his, on the side of his yard. My mother's planted willow trees. When I moved to Tennessee, I don't know what it is.
We hear that time and again.
You do?
From and Lori has expressed something like that tonight. So have you?
Seriously?
Shamans. They have the whole experience of the shaman and the abduction experience they seem to be extremely similar.
So other people have referenced...
Oh, yeah.
And I did that when I was
not necessarily.
That's
it could
9
be,
years old. That's hung in my fourth
certain
grade
animals. It could be, certain trees, plants.
I don't understand
places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lori,
I get it
we got
from
another minute or two, but that's...
Yeah, I get that from mailboxes. I don't know.
Mailbox.
Okay. But something about putting a card into a mailbox. I don't know, but I had that Blessed Virgin Mary sighting when I was 8 years old.
As did I when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because children maybe were open to it, and you know,
part of it too.
You know.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, we're just about out of time, but Lori, it's been a really fascinating discussion, and this all came together at the last minute, and thank you all. Lori, we'll be in touch off the air, and we'll have you back to continue.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
I appreciate meeting you guys, Thom and
Thom and Chris.
Likewise.
Thom and Chris.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Very good. Lori Rehfeldt, Major retired U.S. Air Force. Everyone, one of the more interesting, I think, Rendlesham witnesses we have not heard from a lot in the media. Okay, so I think we can begin to wrap it up here, but I wanted to also thank Thom and Chris Reed. Chris, you haven't said much. Why don't you take a second and tell us about, but do you consider yourself an abductee as well?
I don't actually. I've not to my knowledge have I ever seen anything or actually been abducted myself. I mean, I shouldn't say seen.
You are a
anything.
very special person. That just radiates from you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So is this character, but maybe in a different way. Okay, very good. All right. Well, we do. Speaking of the Rendlesham case, which we've been talking about tonight, the actual conference, Rendlesham 2012 conference, takes place this coming Sunday. If you happen to be in the vicinity of Woodbridge, England, and we have a lot of listeners there, check it out, and you can go to the website. It's rendleshamufo.com, and there are tickets still available. So check it out.
So don't forget our show website, www.behindtheparanormal.com, where you can get all the information on all our speaking tours and events and all sorts of fun things like that, as well as buy books and see what's coming up. We have nearly 400 free podcasts of all our shows available on our website. And again, that's www.behindtheparanormal.com.
And many thanks to our producer once again. Ben has been running the engineer, one of the engineers here at the station. They've been doing a terrific job. And we thank him for his service tonight. And we'll see you next Monday, June 18th, right here on WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com, when Ben and I will present the evidence for strange sounds. This will be one of the weirdest shows you've ever heard. These strange sounds now being reported from all over the world and reportedly coming from the sky or the ground or both. And we'll have pre-recorded interviews with Linda Moulton Howe and Larry Lowe.
All right, on our regular CBS radio edition on Sunday, June 17th in Boston, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Seattle, we'll welcome one of our most popular guests, Murray Silver, author, producer, Washington Insider, and Hollywood Insider, for more talk about his own experiences with ghosts.
And we'll leave you this evening with a quote from the great Helen Keller. When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one that is open for us.
So thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we will see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.